Hello, my awesome business geeks. How you doing today? We're going to talk again, building on our previous episodes about business and strategy. So today, I really want to hammer home on the concept of business strategy and what it is not. Because when we talk about strategy, there's often a misconception in some people's heads thinking that strategy just means having a vision and wishing and a hoping. And that's really not what strategy is. Strategy is more than hoping. It's more than hoping on dumb luck. So when we talk about strategy, we can encapsulate the actions that happen in strategy in some broad buckets. At a really high level, we could say strategy, first of all, involves strategic objectives and analysis. Under this bucket, we're talking about broad categories such as your overarching vision, your overarching mission, broad goals, values. And I tell my students this every week in our Project Leadership Institute. Your vision and your mission, if they aren't dynamic, you are in retrograde, you're going backwards, because this is meant to evolve and move in accordance with the market space and the conditions around you. At all times, a good strategist is thinking about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats constantly, and how those relate to your vision, mission, goals, your values. We could also use a political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal, if you will, perspective. Taking a look at how these elements affect your overarching vision, your overarching mission, your definite chief aim as a company, your goals, your values, because over time, these will morph and change. The next thing you want to be thinking about after you've done your strategic objectives and analysis is beginning to formulate the strategy. And we could call this strategic formulation. And here, you begin to be intentional about your plans. Now, if you remember in our last episode, we talked about the concept of strategy right here, and two things. We talked about intended strategy, we talked about emergent strategy, and we talked about how we get to our final strategy, our realized strategy. It's a combination of planning and on the fly, dealing with the emergence of conditions around you. With that in mind, when we're formulating our strategy and what to do, we're going to have some elements of planning. We're going to have some elements of resource acquisition, if you will. The next thing you want to think about is the implementation. How are you going to implement this strategy based on what you've planned? In order to do this effectively, you find training and resource allocation being huge. A lot of strategies fail because they're not adequate resources. There's an assumption that there will be, but they end up not being. It could be human resources, it could be assets, it could be brain power, it could be money. And last but not least, we have the concept of continually planning through evaluation and controlling. So we call this strategic evaluation and control. And what you're doing here is you're evaluating and you're correcting. Remember, in the very beginning, I said it doesn't stay static. So it's a continuation. This will be a living, breathing organism, if you will. And they are all interconnected. So I want you to think about them like this. I know we've taken a look at them sequentially, but you also need to think about it like this. They're all interconnected. And as we evaluate, we need to go back to a drawing board and always keep tweaking what we have as our vision, what is our formula, how are we implementing, is it working, and the overall control. These are just some of the things you should be thinking about when we talk about strategy, okay? Strategy, in the words of Alfred Chandler, is the determination of the basic long-term goals and objectives of an enterprise and the adoption of courses of action. Courses of action, you see that? The courses of action and allocation of resources necessary for those goals. So when you're thinking strategy, I like the work of Michael Porter because he makes it very clear in his work what strategy is not. What is not strategy, right? Because there's some statements that are so basic and mundane, and they lie about what strategy is. So let's talk about what strategy is not, just for clarity purposes, right? Not strategy. All right, strategy is not a plan alone. Strategy is not just a plan. Having a plan does not give you enough to rest on as a strategy. A strategy could contain a plan, but a plan alone is not a strategy, right? And a strategy is not a plan. So what does Michael Porter say about this? If you don't do it often, it's not strategy. Remember, I talked about going back to a drawing board, massaging the vision, the mission, taking a look at the environmental factors around you. If you're not doing that habitually, it's not strategy, because the marketplace will change around you, and what you thought would work 2 days ago may not work tomorrow. So if you don't pursue a direction for 2 or 3 years, it's meaningless, in the words of Michael Porter, right? Many companies start out with a great strategy, but then they get cocky, they think they're the big kahuna, and they start going backwards. So strategy needs to be an ever-evolving thing, okay? Errors in corporate strategy are often self-inflicted, and a singular focus on shareholder value is the Bermuda Triangle of strategy, says Michael Porter. So we want to have in the back of our minds, things should evolve. We don't just want to rest on our laurels. You get the idea. Still talking about strategy, it's important for us to delineate between production improvements versus strategy. Just because you're improving in your production and you're producing more stuff does not mean you've got a good strategy. For example, in the words of Charlie Munger, he says, when we were in the textile business, which is a terrible commodity business, we were making low-end textiles, which are a real commodity product. And one day the people came to Warren, that's Warren Buffett, and said, they've invented a new loom that we think will do twice as much work as our old ones. And what did Warren say? Gee, I really hope this doesn't work, because if it does, I'm going to close the mill. And he wasn't joking. What did Warren mean by this? What Warren was trying to say is if we produce more of the same bad products quicker or more of the non-advantageous products quicker, that is not even anything to consider as a strategy. That's not how you want to proceed. So making stuff quicker, right? If it's a lousy business, if you're earning substandard returns, that's not going to amount to much. And he knew that the huge productivity increases that would come from a better machine introduced into production of a commodity product that would only go to the benefit of the buyers. In other words, yes, if we're doing things quicker, we're doing things better, the advantage of this thing is only going to the customer. It's not coming to us because we're producing the same stuff that's substandard returns, right? So it's very obvious, right? There are all kinds of wonderful new inventions that give you nothing as owners except the opportunity to spend a lot more money in a business that's going to be lousy. The money still won't come to you. And that's one of the ideas we want to have in the back of our minds when we're thinking about strategy. So strategy is not operational effectiveness. Operational effectiveness could offer competitive advantage, but it's not sustainable, as you've seen in our previous example. Instead, when you think strategy, you want to think about what could distinguish between you and the competitors in the marketplace. What will distinguish us from the others? And what will keep us truly unique, such that if others try to copy, they wouldn't be able to copy. They would find it hard. An example is Southwest Airlines. Think about Southwest, they're a very unique model. And you can go read up more about Southwest. But they had a very unique model. Unique model, low cost, convenient service on a short route, no premium cabin, no meals, no assigned seats, no travel agents, standardized fleet, secondary airports, and so on. Now, what type of airline would not invest in these capabilities? Because these are not consonant with international business travel, right? Then how can other airlines copy Southwest if they want to? Think about it. Would it make sense for big airlines to try that business model when for decades they've known a different model? No. Think about it. No class of seats. That's crazy. So Southwest is a tough act to follow. And that is what strategy is all about. It's tough to compete with Southwest. Many have tried, they've failed. But think about it like this. The probability of being able to imitate a competitor like Southwest is going to decrease exponentially with the more moving parts Southwest introduces into the picture. And trust me, they got a lot of moving parts that distinguishes them from everyone else. So there's a difference between competing to be the best versus competing to be unique. In the words of Michael Porter, he says, the worst error in strategy is to compete with rivals on the same dimensions. You need to change the playing field. You need to disrupt, change the game, right? Strategic positioning attempts to achieve sustainable competitive advantage by preserving what is distinctive. So we're talking about distinction. And as you're going to find out in other papers that we'll take a look at as we proceed in this journey, you'll find the case of companies who started out right out of the gate doing so well. We're going to take a look at the Ofo company out in China. We're going to see what went well, and we're going to see where the decline started happening. And I guarantee you the decline begins to happen when you are no longer unique and the leader, and there's no competitive advantage, right? So when you think about strategic positioning of a company, as we're going to find out later on in this adventure, want to take a look at three key principles. Number one, when we talk about strategy, we talk about uniqueness and value. That's the first thing. How unique are your offerings? How unique is your model? And how unique is the value that you bring, right? So we're talking about a unique and a valuable position involving a unique set of activities. The next thing about strategy that you need to understand is a concept of trade-offs. You cannot do everything, right? So you need to know what not to do and when not to compete. There's stuff that you need to leave on the table for the smaller fish, right? Smaller competition, let them be the bottom feeders, let them clean up, that's fine. But you shouldn't be looking to clean up everything on the ocean floor. Leave it for the bottom feeders, right? And number three, understand that strategy involves creating a fit among your company's activities. And what you want to do is exclude any activities that don't fit. So there's going to be things that you don't do. You know, this is not our lane. We're not competing here. And then you also need to understand things that just don't fit. It's not as though you couldn't do it, but it just doesn't fit. And you don't want it to tarnish your brand and your unique advantage. There are different types of strategic positioning in this world. Strategic positioning. Let's talk about a few. First one is variety-based positioning. And this is positioning that provides a subset of an industry's products or services. The next one is needs-based. And this involves serving the needs of a particular group of customers. Third one is access-based positioning. And this is serving a group of customers that are accessed in a particular way. So it makes economic sense when accessing different groups that require different capabilities, for example. Urban versus rural. There are going to be some folks that allow that to go and go for that. It's all about what works best for the firm and what their game is, you know. So variety-based, number one, needs-based and access-based positions. They're good ways of thinking about trade-offs that you make as a firm when you're formulating a position. For example, Walmart could be argued as a needs-based or access-based position. You look at the time period, 1960s to 2000s. But Walmart was not really ever variety-based, right? They sell everything, don't they? From underwear to guns, isn't that crazy? So Walmart's initial strategy was to locate in rural areas and avoid putting stores in metropolitan areas. So just think along those lines. There are many examples that you'll be able to find regarding these three, but let's round up the discussion and conclude. The conclusion of this particular episode is for you as a business person to understand what is strategy and what is it not. Again, strategy is not about improving efficiency. It's not about changing your functional structure in a firm. That could help, but that is not what strategy is. And remember the words of Mike Porter, if you're not doing this often, you're not doing strategy. You're doing something else. Having a plan does not mean you are strategizing for your business, okay? So I'm just going to leave you with this definition that I like from Michael Porter. And he says, strategy is a broad formula for how a business is going to compete, what its goals should be, and what policies will be needed to carry out those goals, and the combination of the ends, the goals for which the firm is striving, and the means, the policies by which it is seeking to get there. If you've never watched Michael Porter, you can find videos of him right there on YouTube. I'm telling you, you will enjoy listening to him. All right, my friends, that's all for today. I'll see you in the next episode. You take care and bye for now.